good morning. I'm Eric, and here I am again, going through my usual routine, sitting with my early morning cup of tea overlooking the town, but now in a very different atmosphere from that of a few weeks ago. The ring road, instead of being chock-a-block with cars and people, is relatively quiet, which isn't surprising with so many people working from home or on furlough. So, how are Pat and I coping with lockdown and COVID-19? I suppose the same as you, sticking to the restrictions laid down by the government, and trust this monstrous virus doesn't come through the door. And I'm sure, like us, you've all had to put new routines in place, which, let's face it, it has brought some new challenges. Well, it has at our house. Pat said we should do the 2-metre rule. I said, hey, we don't have to. And it's an impossibility anyway. I said, Pat, we don't live in Buckingham Palace. We live in Bijou Palace. So how's it going to work? Easy, Eric. Just keep out of my way. I think it must have been one of her fraught days. On the whole, I think we've got on extremely well. Then again, you better ask Pat. But not just now, if you don't mind, because she's still asleep. And being woken abruptly can put her in a mood. I did it a short while ago, and she became rather temperamental. 50% temper and 50%... I don't have to say it, do I? Rising from her interrupted slumber, Pat headed for the bathroom. And when she came out, it was obvious from the look on her face, one of us had a problem. And the way she was staring at me, I was it. You've done it again, Eric. Done what, Pat? The toilet roll. What about the toilet roll? You've hung it the wrong way. The paper should hang over and not under. How many times have I got to tell you? And I came back with this great line. It's not a hanging offence, is it? It might be if it happens again. Now, please don't think these situations occur all the time. Oh, we have our moments, only to be expected when you're cooped up together for so many weeks. In fact, since the lockdown, we've only had one confrontation, or border incident as I like to call it. It was in early lockdown, and it didn't last long, and once the dust had settled, I considered the matter closed. But Pat's reaction was completely different. With her, it remained open warfare. I'd forgotten ladies have the patience of Job. What a mistake that was. Pat's patience lasted for nearly 3 weeks before delivering retribution. And it was coupled with impeccable timing. Because of the 3-week interval, I thought I'd got away with it, and I'd settled back into my comfort zone. And then, without warning, the onslaught began. Total recall kicked in, and I got chapter and verse of everything that went on. Words of all descriptions were aimed at me, and came faster than bullets out of a machine gun. And after what seemed like hours, the barrage finally stopped and Pat headed for the kitchen, leaving me in a daze. For the next hour, a fragile peace ensued. Then Pat made me lunch and normality was resumed. In fact, I call it the only meltdown in lockdown. I do hope this sounds familiar to some of you gentlemen, because I'd hate to think I was on my own regarding these border incidents. With lockdown and COVID-19, it's amazing how you look at things from a different perspective. I mean, going to the supermarket was a weekly occurrence and wasn't what you'd call a thrilling experience. But since stay-at-home started, our children have done all our shopping. And boy, do we get excited when one of them makes a delivery. The pleasure of emptying the bags, checking the items, and suddenly having our spirits lifted by finding something we couldn't remember ordering. Like a box of Brillo pads. We also have a routine regarding meals. On a Sunday, we check what we have in the freezer and the fridge, and the variety of tin goods in the cupboard. Once the list is complete, we write out a menu for the week, which starts on a Monday. And then we'll say something silly like, "Oh, great, can't wait till Wednesday, because we're having fish fingers and chips." Now, I know what you're thinking. If you like them so much, why don't you have them on a Monday? Now, come on. Whoever writes the menu puts them down for a Wednesday. And that's simple, isn't it? Do you have some useless things, well, maybe rubbish in fact, which you won't part with because they might come in handy one day, but you never do? Well, those items stay in the corner of the garage or shed for years, gathering rust and dust. And only after a very strong hint from your wife do you have a right good clear out and head for the tip. But lockdown's changed all that. Well, it has at our house. All those useless items have come in, and much to my satisfaction. Assorted tins of paints lived in the corner of our garage, each just with a drop of paint in. And guess what? I've used them all up. The smell of paint came from every room in the house. In fun, I dabbed a bit on Pat's nose, and from the look on her face, she was not amused. Then she smiled. She took the brush out of my hand and covered every inch of my face with Magnolia matte emulsion. For Pat, it was a joyous moment. I've done a few other jobs around the house, and Pat's quite pleased with me. In fact, she says, I'm nearly as good as the man she should have married. I'm still trying to work out if that's a compliment. So what else have I done? Well, they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I had a flash of inspiration. We had 3 bananas about to go off. Now, in normal circumstances, they would probably have been thrown away, but not on this occasion. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. I decided to make a banana cake. Well, knowing no one else would have thought of it. What a mistake that was. According to the BBC, it's the most asked for recipe. Seems every household in England had about 3 bananas left. So it's back to the drawing board. Now there's a thought. If someone hadn't invented the drawing board, what would we all go back to? Normally in the evening we watch television, and on a Tuesday it's Pat's turn to have the remote. Believe you me, Wyatt Earp wouldn't stand a chance with Pat. Oh, not in a gunfight, a remote fight. When the advertisements come on, she can, with a blink of the eye, grab the remote and flick channels faster than the speed of light. The other Tuesday evening we were watching a film. Pat had the remote in close proximity, with right hand poised for action, and as sure as night follows day came the commercial break, and in an instant Pat and the remote sprung into action. After a few seconds I realised we could have a problem, and I said, "Pat, what channel were we on?" The remote stopped, and we looked at a shopping channel. Ooh, different coloured cardigans at only $24.99. Quite good value. And Pat stared at me, somewhat bemused, and said, "Never mind the channel. What were we watching?" Well, we looked at each other for ages, and then we burst out laughing because we couldn't remember what the film was called. After a brief discussion, we agreed it was nothing to do with our memories. It was the red wine that had to take all the blame. Now I go out for a daily walk, and I bumped into a friend. Well, I didn't actually bump into him, but he came a little bit too close for my liking. I mentioned he was closer than the regulation 2 metres, and he insisted it was definitely 2 metres away. So I told him, if that's 2 metres, I'm glad you're not fitting me a carpet. So he walked away, chuntering something in Russian. Well, I think it was Russian. I didn't have my hearing aids in. Anyway, whatever he was saying ended in off. Well, I think I've mentioned this, but we don't call them hearing aids at our house. We call them ears. The other day I was watching the news and was engrossed in an interview about the pandemic when Pat came in with my cup of tea, looked at the television and said, "What about Brexit?" And I said, "I'll have a ginger." It was most unusual, and without emotion, Pat said, "Eric, go and put your ears in," which I did. It's okay, I misunderstood, but now we both call them ginger Brexits. And it sounds right if you say it fast. Go on, give it a go. Ginger Brexits. Of course, we can now drive further away from home to take some exercise. But that's no good to me. If the call of nature beckons, I'm snookered. I mean, what are you supposed to do with all the pubs, cafes and public toilets closed? Mind you, in our area, the council decided years ago that people didn't need to go to the toilet anymore, and armed with such knowledgeable information, closed many public toilets. Oh, and this was long before COVID-19 came on the scene. The conveniences had become inconveniences. I hope the council have seen the people fighting over loo rolls in the supermarkets. Where would we be without today's modern technology? To think, when Pat and I were first married in 1965, the telephone for most people was in a box at the end of the street. Times have changed now and we have landlines, mobiles, computers, iPads, laptops, and probably many other things I haven't heard of or forgotten about. Anyway, Pat and I, we love all these modern thingamajigs, to be able to see and speak to family and friends, and especially the grandchildren. It's been a blessing. And what a difference it's made to our lives. Isn't it amazing how we've all become communication technologists? I now have a self-accredited qualification. I'm officially a FaceTimeologist, a Skypeologist, and a Zoomologist. Being certified ologists, I told Pat I was going to Zoom a friend and make his day. And she said, "Have you ever thought about him? You might be spoiling it." So I didn't bother. Oh, I can recall with the look on your faces, you've got the same credentials. I should have known. Everyone's an ologist. All I was trying for was just a little uniqueness, which obviously wasn't to be, was it? And I should have realised that when I baked my exclusive banana cake, along with a few million more, then again, being on the same wavelength as the majority of the population is fine by me. Probably safer as well. The majority. That reminds me. There I was, 2 against 250. Was I scared? Was I hell? Because I was in the 250. I've just remembered. On Pat's remote night, we were watching Mission Impossible. I must let her know when she wakes up. In her own time, of course. Oh, something else has just come to mind. When we were on about communications, I know this chap who's changed his telephone, TV and broadband to another provider. They'd given him a new telephone number, and he was certain his number and Flamborough Lighthouse were similar, because every time he answered the phone, some guy was always asking if the coast was clear. So, what are we looking forward to? Well, for starters, to finally beat this virus, for the 2-metre invisible barrier to disappear, and all restrictions lifted. Then we can get close to family and friends again. And the grandchildren, they've been warned. We will be hugging them till they burst. Now, I'm not big on shopping, but I can't wait to get out there with Pat. I will follow her into every shop, and I shall treasure every moment. As she touches and as she prods and as she pokes everything. I'll even risk garden centres, even though I don't really like gardening. And do-it-yourself stores were never top of my list, but I have warmed to them over the past few weeks. And of course, I do need some more paint to stick in the corner of the garage. Before this monstrous virus arrived, we took so much for granted. Well, Pat and I won't be making that mistake again, and I'm sure you're all the same. Sorry, I'm going to have to go. I can hear Pat calling for a cup of tea. So, bye everyone.